And I'm live, I think. I hope. Let me just check. Ooh, my thing's not changed online. If you are there, let me know. Say hi. Oh, yeah, there we go. Everything's caught up. Tech issues, honestly, I am trying my best. I'm hoping we're going to have a few people come in and join us. It'd be nice to get some chat going because I think this is such a big topic for all of us, and everyone's opinion and thoughts and feelings are all very much welcome. So, yeah, for those of you who have never been with me on one of my streams before, my name is Andy and this is Craftalytical, where I use my personal experience and real world examples to help us make sense of ourselves and the world around us. Now, hopefully, as people join us, I started dead on time, and I know that is something that is quite unusual for YouTube. We don't normally do that as streamers. There's usually some sort of hiccup. So I'm waiting for someone to pop up in chat and say to me, yep, can't hear a thing, or can't see you. That's something else that I am expecting. Right. So, yeah, bit of a delay as well, which doesn't help. I hate delays. I hate live stream delays. It makes it very hard to have a conversation. So what I do here is about you, helping you in your day-to-day life, helping you make sense of some of the madness that is around us all of the times, or things that are really difficult for us to process about ourselves. I feel, for most of us, it is easier to learn from watching someone else from the outside. So I like to share that knowledge. I like to share different ways of thinking of things. You don't have to agree with me all of the time. That's not a problem. I welcome other people's opinions and thoughts and feelings because it's important. As long as it is good faith debate, I'm here for it. So I wanted to talk today about collective trauma. Because I think we've all been through one again with the Ocean Gate Titan sub that was, to use the nicer term, lost at sea. It would appear that there was a catastrophic failure that led to decompression. The sub is most likely to have imploded, which is just awful. We were living this news story for days, hoping that they were somewhere down there and they would be found. And as the days went on, we learnt more about the design of the sub. The safety concerns were raised that they were using a carbon fiber hull design, which most people in the industry were skeptical about. But, on the flip side of that, this sub was designed in conjunction with NASA scientists, with marine scientists. So it wasn't like it was thrown together and poorly designed. However, the sub had also been on multiple missions And there's only so much pressure that a vehicle can take. Deep sea pressure is just huge. We think about the pressure that spaceships, rockets go through, the ISS goes through, and that's in more or less zero gravity, right? You know, it's some scientist is going to correct me on that, but you know, we talk about those stresses on aeroplanes, stresses on boat hulls. So to do multiple missions that far under the sea is it's hardly surprising that microfractures happen. The good thing is, and I spoke about this the other day, that worst case scenario, these people are, you know, trapped in a sub in complete darkness. Now, this isn't your eyes are going to adjust. This is the absolute absence of light. You know, everything else becomes very heightened. Your adrenaline is rushing. There's panic. There's, you know, all sorts of thoughts going through your head. And with no airflow and everything else, or a depletion of airflow, that can get pretty nasty very quickly. So as awful as it is, an implosion is a far kinder way to go. They wouldn't, you know, it's milliseconds. It's faster than a bullet travels. So that in itself was a relief, I think. For most of us who know, you know, a little bit more than your average Joe, I think we were all expecting something like this. But it has come out, James Cameron, as well as the movie director, as well as a lot of other experts have come out and said, you know, we knew on Monday that this was the outcome, and search and rescue was futile. It was a waste of money and resources and man hours. Because it was confirmed by the Navy that there was a sound consistent with implosion at the exact point that communication was lost, and they were no longer able to track the sub. So this is new information to me, at least, that they weren't able to track the sub at that exact moment. And anyone who has done these dives, anyone who has been involved in the tech knows exactly what that means. If you can't track them and you've lost communication, and the Navy, you know, have confirmed that there was an implosion, unfortunately, they are no longer with us, and spending 4 days trying to find a sub and talking about it as if, you know, it's search and rescue was cruel on the family and friends. If I'm being completely honest, I don't think that was a good way to go about it. And you know, in terms of collective trauma, you know, everyone gets behind something like this. Everyone wants a good outcome. Well, I say everyone, not everyone, and we'll get onto that in a bit. But, you know, most of us really wanted a good outcome, especially for Suleiman Darwood, who was just 19. That's the heartbreaking thing about it is, you know, everyone else on the sub were born explorers. They were there and knew the risks and took those on board for themselves. It would appear that Suleiman wasn't there because he wanted to be there. He was you know, he wasn't into the idea of doing it, but it was a Father's Day bonding experience with his dad, and he went because his dad wanted him to, and that's heartbreaking. That is it, so heartbreaking. You know, all of the others, the CEO, especially, you know, he's the one who cut corners with safety. He's the one who ignored anyone coming forward with concerns. In fact, there was a chap who was fired for bringing forward concerns. You know, it was his choice that took 4 other people with them. And of course, it's left the co-founder and the board members and other people involved in Ocean Gate under be hefty lawsuits. And often with this kind of thing, this kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It's the people who survive and the people left behind that have to pick up the pieces. It's, you know, sad beyond measure, I think. And that's it, really distressing. It's really distressing. I'm going to reach up to my camera. You're going to go wibbly for a second, but I've had some notifications. Sorry, I'm using my phone as a camera because it's better than most cameras. Sorry, reading sideways. I am so professional. You can tell, can't you? The problem is I wear bifocals. Sorry, little message. Yeah, so I think we kind of exploring this from all angles. We then, you know, we go from living with this story and worrying about the people and, you know, driving ourselves a little bit peculiar with all of the updates and watching the news and consuming everything we can, to then this, you know, we get the answers, we get told what happened. And there's this defeated moment that then turns to anger, especially in a situation like this. You know, someone caused this. Someone made the choices, the bad choices and the good, to skip some safety stuff. Now, whether that contributed to the implosion or not, obviously it has come out that this is, you know, it's not the safest way to go and do things. And that there are, you know, I think the CEO actually said that, you know, exploring is a dangerous business and kind of who cares about safety. And obviously, given that they've allegedly sacked someone for bringing up safety concerns, I think, you know, we are angry. This was needless loss. And any life lost in a needless, senseless way is, you know, heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. There are some that have been gleeful about the sub being lost. I've seen some pretty awful tweets, some pretty awful YouTube videos. I've not clicked on any of them. I can't be doing with it. But what I have seen, some of the YouTube titles of, rich people die doing stupid things, and it's not necessary. You can dislike someone. You absolutely can. You can hate someone. You can loathe someone. But at the end of the day, they're still a human being. They still have family. And everyone that has come out and spoken about them have spoken very genuinely from the heart. And this idea that because they're rich, and it is the money that is mentioned in these things, it's a way of distancing yourself. It's a way of othering people. It's a way of kind of calling it hubris. Just to put this into perspective, is the equivalent of someone on my salary, or lack of salary, having a pop at someone who has, gone to a, the words escaped me. Let's see if I'm back. I'm hoping I am back. If anyone is out there, anyone at all, if you could help me out and let me know whether the stream is still running. Can you, whoops, see and hear me again? Whoops. Honestly, what a nightmare, this streaming thing. No one prepares you. No one. Well, no, that's not true. We all have these moments. Oh, never mind. I've had 3 views and the average view duration is 11 seconds. Yep. Anyway, right. So with the wealth thing, going back to that, I've seen some really unpleasant comments. Wealthy people die doing something stupid, or it's the height of irony that you would be in a shipwreck on your way to see a shipwreck. And it's bad taste. Number one, people died. And I'm not a big fan of making jokes about someone dying anyway. There were a load about the Queen, and didn't land well for me. But also that there seems to be a jealousy because all of them mention wealth. Wealth is one of the first descriptors of these people, and it's the equivalent of someone having an accident at Disneyland. I'm not accusing Disneyland of anything, but that to me is the trip of a lifetime for my kids, because there is no way we can afford something like that on what we have coming into the household. It's a big thing to fly out to America anyway. You add into that just how expensive Disneyland and all of the added stuff would be. It's the equivalent of me saying to them, well, you shouldn't have gone to Disneyland. You knew the risks getting on the ride. You knew the risks getting in the car or on a plane or, whatever else. That would be seen as petty and awful to say something like that. And you have, YouTubers and influencers who are earning, 100 times what I have coming in, ad revenue and donations and sponsorships and all of that stuff, selling their own merch. Saying this about someone who has 100 times more money than they do, or more. And that to me doesn't land either. I don't begrudge someone who earns more money than me going on a fancier trip than me. These people were paying, yes, they were paying for a trip of a lifetime. They were also there to survey the wreck. They were there as part of a survey team. They were paying to work as well as have a good look at something that none of us are ever going to see. None of these YouTubers or influencers or anything else were talking about, William Shatner going into space, or going into the ionosphere, stratosphere. None of them were mocking that and, saying that was about wealth. No one says it when someone who does something dangerous for a living has an accident, whether that's in their off time like Michael Schumacher, or on the racetrack like Roman Grosjean, or Ayrton Senna. No one says, hey, you knew the risks getting behind the wheel. It doesn't translate for me. And that's part of my trauma with all of this. That is part of why it's so distressing for me, is the fact that these were people, by all accounts, they were nice people. I do this every time. Shahzada Darwood, the father of the 19-year-old Suleiman, he was on the board of directors of the Prince's Trust. Really big charitable foundation here that does an awful lot of work in the arts, heritage crafts, celebrating charities and people who give back to their community. These weren't rich people that just didn't care about anyone else. These were people you had never heard of until the sub went missing. But suddenly it's now okay to say something awful. That is part of, and I think also with the media kind of both siding it, and making it, more sensationalized before it needs to be, is also part of it. So collective trauma. Let's talk about what we came here to talk about after all of this time. I'm so sorry. Collective trauma is when a culture, a society, a group of people go through a trauma together. Now, we saw this on a really big scale. We saw this with the pandemic. Everyone's mental health and lifestyle and everything else was altered by this once in a lifetime, once in, 100 years event. We all went through that trauma. Now, it's different for every person because we're all unique, but we all collectively went through that. And that happens on a smaller scale. If you have someone who was a big part of your friendship group who has a terrible accident or passes away, everyone within that community, that friendship group, will suffer that collective trauma. When no one knows what to do, because we all need comfort, but we all want to comfort other people. We all want to understand. We all want to have answers, where everything gets really confusing and it leaves us with a long-running issue surrounding that thing. And we also see this with missing persons cases, with deaths of celebrities. Freddie Mercury was a big one for us in our household. Queen was a big influence in our lives. And I remember where I was and what I was doing when the news broke. And we as a family were in shock for weeks or months. And I remember my dad having an argument with his mother. He had never raised his voice or said anything like it, even close to standing up to her. Him having an argument with her over the kind of person Freddie Mercury was, because again, she was kind of bad mouthing Freddie Mercury, and that was the line for Dad. We see it when Lance Reddick and other people pass away, much beloved actors and everything else. You don't have to have met the person to be affected by them passing, something awful happening. So we feel it in those situations. We feel it when when there's a big crime case. We feel that collective trauma. Over here, an example of that was finding out that all of these people that were childhood stars in our childhood, were terrible human beings that were doing terrible things to people who didn't deserve it. We can feel it on a more localized scale within our community, our family, our friendship groups, or we can feel it on a national or even international level. And the international example of that would be MH370 going missing, or something like the sub. Even things like Gabby Petito, her going missing, and how that's all played out, and the fact that that's still going, those kind of cases. Also, the war in Ukraine. This terrible, unbelievably unjust, not that war is really a just thing, but, Ukraine didn't do anything. Russia are the aggressors, and the shock of this war happening. Now, I'm old enough to remember the first Gulf War really clearly, and how that was kind of the same. Again, British Army went in with, NATO allies, and my dad was on the front line, so maybe that was a little bit too close to home. But, again, Q8 didn't, do anything. It was about resources. It was about power, and that's the same with the war in Ukraine. And in the first month or so, we all felt that horrific trauma, having just been through a global trauma with a pandemic. So we can feel it to varying degrees. Now, some people aren't as affected or can switch it off almost. Other people, I feel it with almost everything. It's up and down, and different subjects can trigger us into this collective trauma state outside of kind of how we would normally react, maybe. With missing people, with tragedies, with disasters like the sub, we are more likely to feel it because it's a smaller group. It's more imaginable. It's easier for us to put ourselves in that situation. How would we feel in that situation if we were trapped in a sub in pitch black, not knowing if we were going to be rescued? When they talked about the noises, we could imagine them banging on the side of the sub every 30 minutes to get attention. And again, that's something that we know has happened before. Pearl Harbor, ships that they had to leave to sink because it wasn't safe to rescue people. And they were at the bottom of the dock, under all of that water, banging every 30 minutes. So these are things that we can imagine. It's a small group. We can all name 5 people that, you know, we could imagine being on a sub with. Is a sentence I never thought I'd say, but it is true. Whereas when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people affected, displaced, hurt, killed in the earthquake on the border of Syria and Turkey, for instance, there was less compassion for that globally than there is for these types of cases where it's only 5 people. Why is that? It is because it's easier to imagine the small group. Once you hit a certain number of people, and it's different for everyone, but once you hit a certain number of people, it's really hard to imagine that many people. It's too big a concept for our brain to comprehend. Now, there are some people who just don't bother thinking about it. But for most of us, it is really hard to imagine. I remember during or just after Hurricane Katrina, when they were talking about the amount of people that had lost their lives during that. It was, you know, a football stadium of people. You can imagine a football stadium, and you can imagine it full of people. You can't imagine suddenly those people no longer being there. That's the point, that your brain kind of goes, nope, too big a problem, too much for me. And we get that with really big disasters. It's why kind of TV ratings for the Ukraine war have gone down. Is because this concept suddenly becomes so big when we're talking about loss of life in, you know, thousands, hundreds of, you know, tens or hundreds of thousands. It is really hard to comprehend. And it is why it's so easy for people to become deniers of horrific disasters, tragedies, you know, going as far as the Holocaust. Because it's too big a number, so it can't be real. And it's awful. It's awful to realise that that's what's happening. We have the luxury of switching off from it. We have the luxury of kind of going, you know, giving into our brain, kind of going, nope, does not compute. We're also less likely to feel collective trauma when it's, you know, something happening at a distance. You know, the greater the distance, the easier it is to kind of switch off from it. So give you an example, in 2019, Australia was hit with horrific wildfires that were almost uncontrollable in every way possible. Do you remember the wildfires? Probably vaguely. Do you remember the loss of life, the loss of homes, the loss of, you know, property or other stuff? Probably not. What do you remember? The cute koala finding a firefighter for a cuddle and a drink of water, right? Or the cute animals that were rescued. It's because we can imagine that. We kind of half want a cuddle with a koala, right? So that's the bit that we remember. We remember the bit that makes us happy, the happy stories, the things that brighten it up. Because it's an away game for us. We're the other side of the world. It doesn't affect us directly. So we watch it on the news and we feel sad for a little bit, and then we move on with our life, and then a cute koala video turns up. Now, I've spoken about this before. It's the compassion to inaction cycle. It's a trap. You know, something terrible happens. We feel instant empathy and compassion. We then can't comprehend, can't compute the numbers, the severity, the whatever, and we go into inaction and guilt, and then we bury it until the next news story. And these traps are things that we need to find an off-ramp for. We need to work out why we switch off and what we can do about that. And the problem is with some of these YouTube comments and influences and tweets, there was a disgusting one from someone who, she describes herself as a communist. She says she's far left and a communist. Sakar Ash, I want to say, she tweeted out and said, well, if millionaires and billionaires can afford to go and see the Titanic, we're not taxing them enough. We can have a political conversation about taxes, and I think we'd agree that maybe the top 1% should be paying just a fraction more, and it would solve world poverty. But now is not the time to make this political. And that's some of the issue is people have deliberately made it political, deliberately made it them and us. And some of this is coming from, like I said, people who earn a decent amount of money, earn over their national kind of average wage, who own their own house, have their own car, don't have to worry about paying bills month to month, or shouldn't if they budgeted well. So, and even this Sakar Ash, she's went on a morning program, sat there in her designer suit, telling us mere mortals that we should be angry at rich people. Like, you're edging up there. Who do you think you are lecturing me about how I should feel about this and whether I should have compassion for these people because they could afford a nice day trip? Well, 10-day trip. So there's a tribalism about this kind of thing. Or they're a different nationality. They're the other side of the world. It doesn't affect me. And it should be more about the, how would I feel? When people were coming to other countries, the UK included, from Ukraine, displaced with nothing, I sat down and worked out whether we could make space for someone. Because I would, if something happened here and we had to flee the country, I would hope someone would do that for us. You can't expect to take when you're not willing to give. So how does this embolden people? This is how it emboldens people to say whatever they want. Make these outrageous statements, because it's someone else. It's othering someone. It's divisive. It gets them clicks, gets them I've done videos on clickbait and people deliberately manipulating to be able to get a click out of you, which is horrible. It's really unpleasant. Sorry, just switching screens briefly to make sure I'm not missing any chat. So, it emboldens people to say whatever they want, and get away with it. Because even when people say, hey, that's a low blow, in this case, 5 people lost their life. Even if you discount the CEO because he made the choices that could have led to other people's deaths, still 4 people who didn't need to pass. Sorry, I'm just checking my notes because I've done a lot of rambling. you know, we do try and concentrate on the cute stories as well. We want to hear the stories. And again, going back to Ukraine, you know, I loved seeing the stories of resistance. We don't hear many of them now, and that is a real shame. But you know, my partner and I have often said if something like that happened here, we would be right into the resistance. We would be doing what we could to make it harder for any invading forces. And, you know, grandmothers walking up with packets of sunflower seeds and giving them to Russian troops and saying, you know, at least something will grow where you fall. You know, these acts of rebellion, you know, crafting groups getting together to make camo netting. You know, we look for the helpers. We look for that FU spirit when something like that happens, especially here in the UK. We like a bit of that because it's blitz mentality. Stiff upper lip. You know, we're going to give you a rough ride of this. If you think you can come over here, then you got another thing coming. So we look for those, but we switch off from the other stuff because that collective trauma is just too big. It's way too big sometimes, and it's okay. But you know, when you notice that happening, and when I notice that happening, I give myself a swift kick. What we need in the world, what I honestly believe we need is more kindness and more empathy and more compassion. You don't have to like someone, but you can understand that could be someone you know. If that was, you know, someone you knew and someone was on the internet mocking them and saying, you know, it was hubris or whatever, how would you feel? Because it's a low blow. At some point, their family members are going to see some of this. They may not see your video, your tweet, your thoughts. Excuse me. But at some point, they're going to see someone's. And I can't imagine what that would be like. You know, I know I would absolutely hate that. I would hate for that to happen. You know, my other half to stumble across a video on YouTube or a tweet out there about me and how it's great that I'm dead, you know? Can you imagine the upset and the hurt? And that's going to live with someone forever. You know, we need to think about our actions. We need to think about loving other people. And we need to think about the damage we can do with this kind of thing. There have been some comments that I've completely dismissed. I know the people that have made them well enough to know that they're drama llamas, and they're looking for the hate replies, the angry replies. You know, it's the kind of thing they thrive on. So, you know, I've ignored some of them, but there are some people that I'd hoped that, or I expected them to be more compassionate. You know, it's a bit like the Kylie Rodney case. To start off with, everyone was incredibly compassionate and boosting signal, where is she, and everything else. As soon as they found her car, it became about the sensationalism. There were, you know, rumours broadcast as if they were fact. You know, people got fame hungry, I think, and said things that were ill-advised, or were, you know, attacking other YouTubers, attacking, other true crime buffs, or attacking the true crime community full stop, which is ironic. So, since no one is here and I've spoken to myself for quite some time, for an hour, that's really sad. Really, really sad. Oh, I guess everyone's busy on a Friday night. How dare you have lives outside of what I do? How dare you? Hey, how are you doing? Oh, hi. It is so nice to see you. I was just saying that, I am here on my Todd. You couldn't get a signal. That's really sad. Anyone would think you were in the middle of nowhere. But I appreciate you dropping in. I really, really do. I think you're awesome. You were one of my favorite people. I was just saying no one was here. And I'd been talking to myself for nearly an hour, which is always nice. What are your thoughts? Well, thank you for stepping outside. I hope you don't have too much longer on your shift. Do you have any thoughts on this sub situation, the collective trauma that it caused? Have you seen any bad takes or good takes on the situation? You're having a little skive. There is nothing wrong with a little skive, Jill. Nothing. I love the fact that you're here. I love the fact that you're skiving off work to come and see me. Do you know, that has made the last hour of no one being here well worth it. Thank you. Absolutely well worth it. Yeah. Oh, you watched my video yesterday. Yeah, it is, for me, it is tragic. It doesn't matter how much money you've got, doesn't matter where you live, who you are, the fact that you went on something and there's a waiver that has like 100 different ways to die, but actually that waiver may not be enforceable. Most waivers aren't as enforceable as people think they are. And it doesn't matter what someone writes in a waiver, nothing can prepare you and give you enough information to say, yeah, I'm fine with this. Likening it to childbirth. People say it's painful. It doesn't matter what anyone says, you are not prepared for it. You are not. Whether you break a leg or dislocate a joint or whatever else, people can tell you that it's painful, you're not prepared for it. So this waiver, yeah, I'm not sure that imploding would have been on that list. If it was, then they were very, very thorough. And even if it was, I mean, you look at something like that and go, what are the chances of imploding? What are, the odds of this are astronomically small. Because you trust the company. They've done this before. There have been, tens, if not hundreds of missions that they've done down to the Titanic. What could possibly go wrong? There was someone on the news who he did the same run with the same company last year, and he was saying, the worst that they were told had happened prior to them going was the sub went down, did what it normally does, and then came up to the surface, and it was on the surface, and it was on the surface for 27 hours because the water was too rough for them to safely pull it out of the ocean. And they played games, they sang, they did all sorts of other stuff. Everything was fine. So really, when you're going through all of that safety training and getting all of that information, if that's the worst that can happen, I can cope with being on the ocean surface for, oh, am I back? I can cope with being in a sub for 27 hours playing games, and yes, it's going to get claustrophobic and it's going to smell bad, but I can get through that. If that's what you're being told, then yeah, I mean, for some people that would be their worst nightmare, but are you going to get in a sub if you're not happy with being in an enclosed space for an extended period of time? Given that it takes 2 hours to get to the Titanic anyway. Thank you. I'm glad I'm still here. I think another reason why we connect with this is, the idea of being trapped, the idea of feeling like we're buried alive, even if we're not. We've all had that experience where we've got stuck in something, right? I remember being on a plane. I must have been 5 or 6, and I got stuck in the toilet on the plane. And no one came to find me, and I started to get more and more panicked, and I started banging on the door, and a very lovely Indian gentleman, he heard me banging from his seat, and he went and got an air stewardess, and she let me out. So we've all had an experience. Yeah, for a lot of people, it is their worst nightmare. It is their worst nightmare, and we can identify with that, and we can, I think we're more traumatized by that kind of situation. We don't know the people, we've never met them, but we can be traumatized by the idea of what they went through. The best case scenario is other than them being found and rescued, immediately, or them being on the surface somewhere, was what happened, because it was so quick. My nightmare scenario for them was running out of oxygen. The actual oxygen deprivation is like going to sleep. It's the 5 days that they had leading up to that would have been absolutely awful. And I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I really, really wouldn't. There isn't a single person I have ever met that I would gleefully give that fate to. And this is why I'm so upset with people mocking what happened to them, mocking this whole rich people die doing something stupid idea. Luckily we won't ever go through something like that, or the odds against it are astronomical, because we're not going to get in a sub, right? We're fine. And we don't live somewhere where we get things like earthquakes or hurricanes that often, or tornadoes that are bad enough to cause that kind of disaster. We are very, very lucky. Other than the fact that it rains a lot here, we're very lucky that we don't have those kind of issues. That's all I can say. Let's just check. Sorry, hold on. No, and I agree with you here. I absolutely agree with you here. It's unlikely, even if they had found them. Now, part of the problem with this is it took 8 hours for the team on the boat to raise the alarm. 8 hours is a long time to wait. They waited 8 hours from losing contact and not being able to track the vessel. That happened simultaneously before they contacted the Coast Guard or any authorities, and that's a long time. But it did get to a point kind of Thursday morning or even Wednesday, if they were on the bottom of the ocean running out of air, even if they had located them Wednesday lunchtime, formulating a rescue plan and actually being able to complete that rescue plan with the undercurrents that are that close to the Titanic. Apparently there is a really fast and hard undercurrent that has caught the sub before. Again, I think this was last year or year before, and it basically pushed it into the propeller of the Titanic, and they had to wiggle themselves free. So with that kind of undercurrent and that kind of thing, it would have been very difficult to mount a rescue operation. So that, and the authorities, Coast Guard and Navy, were looking for the sub 2.5 miles away from where it was. They didn't deploy ROVs until the private company turned up Thursday morning with theirs, and they located the debris really quickly. But reports do say that the Navy knew on Monday that the sub had imploded. They recorded a sound. So there's lots of essentially underwater microphones around the world where they pick up all sorts of noises. They picked up a noise in that vicinity, triangulated it to a X amount of mile radius, and it was consistent with an implosion. So they knew on Monday that that the sub was a high probability that the sub had imploded, suffered a catastrophic failure. And I was saying earlier that this idea, there's a lot of people in the submersible industry, as well as people like James Cameron, the movie director, saying it was futile. The search was completely pointless because they knew all of this. He knew it on Monday. He found out what had happened, got a hold of... Oh, thank you. I like this sofa too. It's really comfy. I'm sat in my desk chair, which is not, but yeah, nice sofa. Yeah, James Cameron found out that the sub had gone missing, got in contact with some people that he knew in the industry, in the submersible industry, and every single one of them went, yeah, it's gone. He got intel from, whether it was directly from the Navy or from one of the rescuers, but he got intel directly from them that said, it imploded. So why they wasted days and what can only be millions of dollars, millions and millions of dollars, in search and rescue, I'll never know. I mean, the only thing I can imagine it was that this was a really good chance for an emergency training drill. But the whole time they're on the news saying, yeah, it's still a rescue mission. It is still, we're still aiming to find these people and bring them home, that's a cruelty. If they knew the sub had imploded and they were just waiting to find evidence, they should have said that. Maybe it was keeping the public happy. But we've had other disasters where the news has been instant, this terrible thing had happened. You know, it was at the very least cruel to the families and friends, you know. Yeah, no, I mean, I do get what you mean. And I think, you know, if the Navy had just released a statement saying it imploded and there was no search and rescue, there would have been questions. And in the current state of things, you know, someone would have started with conspiracy theories. You know, oh, these were really rich people. Were they part of some secret society or the Illuminati or, you know, something? So, you know, you've got to balance things, I guess. But my heart goes out to the family having to hear that on the news. I need to find out now, you know, a day after you've had, a day after you've been told that the sub imploded, to now watch the news and find out that, you know, James Cameron knew on Monday. I'd be pretty peed off if that was the case. I would be, you know, and that would be added to a lawsuit. You know, a bit like Gabby Petito's family kind of saying, well, you knew and you deliberately held that information. You know, I would be saying that to OceanGate. You knew, you had all of the information, that not only did you lose contact, you also couldn't track them anymore. And all of those things happen at the same time. You knew this thing imploded. And you kept us guessing and hoping for 4 extra days. Not okay. I think most people, not all, but most people would want to know the truth. If there was, you know, yeah, I think most people would want to know the truth, even if it was, you know, what's that phrase? Be cruel to be kind. Rip the Band-Aid off. Don't leave people to hope for longer than they need to when you know what has happened. You've all of this circumstantial evidence, I guess, says the likelihood is, and I guess maybe, you know, the wealth of these people comes into it a little bit, that you've got to satisfy insurance policies and everything else. You know, it's the whole proof of life for a kidnapper or a kidnapped person. It's proof of death beyond a reasonable doubt for all of these other things that, you know, you get. Yeah, bad news is absolutely better than no news. I couldn't agree more. I would rather know. I can deal with, I've said it before in other videos, I'm one of those people that I can deal with anything if I've got all of the facts. I'm a data-driven person. If I know, I can, you know, have my 2 days of dealing with how I feel if I have the luxury of time, and then I pick myself up and say, what's next? And it's not that I don't care, it's I have to focus on getting through. And I think a lot of people are like that, you know. Excuse me slurping. I hope that wasn't too bad. Can you just confirm for me, before you go, can you confirm for me that when I click on a chat, does that come up on screen for you? I'm trying to work out how to bring chat up on the screen so other people can see what I'm replying to, and I just want to make sure that that comes up. I know Stream Elements is here, but I need to adjust the settings because actually it's spamming. I need to get that changed because that's like I set it up for kind of every 10 minutes or and it appears to not be doing it every 10 minutes. So yeah, does that chat come up when I click on it? Just need to make sure. Because otherwise I need another training session. No, I haven't commented, so other than before the stream started. So yeah, I've clicked on your chat. Has that come up on your screen? As a kind of, like other people who aren't prats like me have, a comment come up on screen. I just want to make sure that I'm getting it right because, tech issues. We've discussed this. Wouldn't be a live stream in our little community if there weren't tech issues. Yeah. I'm sorry, I keep touching my nose. I had my my bar changed. I don't have a problem or anything, but I had my nose pierced at the beginning of the month. Something I've always wanted done, and I had it done as a birthday present, belated birthday present. Well, the gift card was the gift was given to me on my birthday, but that's when it was booked for, and I had the bar downsized today. Oh, nothing has come up with the chat. What am I doing wrong, Jill? What am I doing wrong? I need Zayden or someone to to explain it to me, because I don't know. It's coming up on my thing, but it's not coming up with yours. So I will figure it out for next time, I promise. You get back to work. Thank you so much for coming. For anyone who's watching on the replay, I appreciate you. You kept stabbing yourself on your nose piercing. They get caught on things that you're not expecting them to get caught on. So when my kids come for a cuddle, the amount of times I end up tangled up in their hair, which is another reason for having the bar downsized, because it was ridiculously long, and it was either poking my septum kind of inside, or gets caught in their hair. Thank you so much for saying that I've got this. I really appreciate you. Have a great evening at work, if you can. But I'm sending a huge amount of love. Thank you so much for being here and joining in the conversation. It really is. It is so much easier when people are willing to join in the chat. It makes it more informative. We get so much more input and interesting kind of viewpoints, because I'm always open to that. You have, for if you catch this at another time, I don't think so. You have upped my average view duration from 11 seconds to 4 minutes and 11 seconds, and I love you for that. Thank you. I am really glad that that you caught me as well. Thank you. If you're watching on the replay, add comments. Let me know your thoughts. I'm sorry about all of the technical issues, but hopefully it all makes sense. I'm just really sorry that everyone has something to do on a Friday. Everyone's over on, more established YouTube channels. They're still at work, or, maybe the sub isn't something you want to talk about. collective trauma is a little bit sad for a Friday evening. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I'm going to sign off for now. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being on the replay. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll do this again soon.